When I first went into real estate full time, leaving corporate America, I struggled like everyone else. I would find a deal, not know what to do with it. When you first start doing this journey, you don't realize that you can buy off market deals. You don't need a realtor, you don't need a bank. It's very countercultural when you're first starting out. I would be afraid to sign a contract, afraid to go to closing, and afraid. But then everything started clicking. But it wasn't until I made some failures along the way before it did. Don't buy without having equity day one, in my opinion. I see a lot of people in like Gatlinburg paying $1 million for a cabin and putting 200,000 down. And then all of a sudden their bookings are loosening up right now and they're not getting, $500 a night. I love Airbnb, but I think it's important to be able to pivot into other models with the same property.
Good day, everyone. This is Dr. David Phelps of the Freedom Founders Mastermind Community and the Dentist Freedom Blueprint Podcast. Back with one of my longtime friends. It's just a pleasure to have Jim Ingersoll with us. Jim's from Richmond, Virginia, and we've probably known each other for, I guess, a good 15 years, give or take, something like that. Jim, I know that your girl's now married with grandkids. We're still single young ladies, and we took some trips together here and there, and the years have passed quickly, haven't they?
They sure have. I think Melissa and Krista were in like junior high school when I started this, and now they're 30 and having kids and happily married and doing real estate full time.
And doing real estate. Well, that's another piece we might touch on today. Is sometimes the generational entrepreneurial aspects that you and Cheryl derived in your own iteration of starting your life together, and you coming from being an engineer and taking that background. And shifting and finding real estate. Maybe just for our listeners, just a little bit of that background, just to get people up to speed. And we'll bring it up to present day and talk about some current market things. But take us back a little bit, Jim, to how you and Cheryl, first kind of got started. It was, as I remember, you just came out of the gate and hit some big home run right out of the gate.
No,
not quite. Okay.
No, actually, our investing journey started soon after we got married. Cheryl was 19, I was 21, and we bought a duplex and did everything wrong. And I ended up selling it on a land contract escape, no problem. I probably broke even or close to it, but it was a disaster. And Cheryl, at the end of that, said, "We will never be a landlord again." And so I did everything wrong. I didn't have a network. I didn't have training. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't know how to manage property or rehab it or manage capital, manage that, none of it. But anyways, I escaped. That cost me 10 years, by the way, by not having the right people in my life. So during that 10 years, I was climbing the corporate ladder, and my background's electrical engineering, and you mentioned that. But at the end, I was running a couple of factories, and all of that was fine. Also participated in the outsourcing to China, made some trips to China, went through all that stuff, and you just get tired of it. And, growing up, my dad worked hard and told us, get a good education, work hard, climb the corporate ladder, everything's good. I didn't know that you become the average of the 5 people and your network equals your net worth or any of that. But it all sort of changed when I started attending Jack Miller events, and Jack had such a profound influence on so many of us, along with Peter Fortunato, an amazing mind, and John Schaub and Jimmy Napier while he was alive. And that's where I met you and Quincy and so many others. And all of a sudden the light bulbs went off. But when I first went into real estate full time, leaving corporate America, I struggled like everyone else. I would find a deal, not know what to do with it. And, when you first start doing this journey, you don't realize that you can buy off market deals. You don't need a realtor, you don't need a bank. But it's very countercultural when you're first starting out. And so I would struggle. I would be afraid to sign a contract and afraid to go to closing and afraid. But then everything started clicking. I found a little package of property from a landlord named Bob Sykes, and he actually owned about 20 properties, and maybe half of them were in pre-foreclosure. And so I just started wholesaling Bob's properties, and then everything clicked. But it wasn't until I made some failures along the way before it did.
Well, making some failures, that's part of life. I think we have to get over that a little bit. But now there's ways to to mitigate the
Yeah.
intensity, as you said, and I'm the same way. I'm probably so many people listening to us today, Jim, same way. The first properties we usually bought were certainly by the standards of what we look at today. Of course, we have criteria, we have experience, and we don't have that. So
Right.
you got to step out somewhere. And most of the time when we do that, Jim, when we get outside our technical training, I came from dentistry, you were from engineering, but we still have this entrepreneurial spirit. And somehow we found real estate, and a lot of people do, and they kind of do like we did, and step into something. Most of the time, that first one, it's got pitfalls, but I've heard the story so often, as you said, that first duplex, it was probably a break even. And, real estate's pretty kind and patient. Now, I know break even from a monetary standpoint, of course, you probably had a lot of time and stress. That's probably what Cheryl was indicating. Maybe not a break even on that, but that's part of the lessons that we get to evolve to where we want to try to go. And you did that. So many people we know have done that same way. But the key thing I think you said was sometimes it just takes a little while to find the right people that become the average of the five. Find those people. You spoke of Jack Miller, which again, was right in my wheelhouse. Same thing. I had to find him. He wasn't there. I didn't know him. Didn't have a mentor when I bought my first property. It was just reading some books and just taking a stab at it, right? And not knowing what I didn't know. But real estate, is pretty kind. But if you find the right people, then I think the other thing I want to just pick up on, you said you basically lost 10 years. I mean, that really resonated with me, because how often do we try to do stuff ourselves because we've been pretty successful, maybe going through school, right, and getting the grades, climbing that ladder, whatever it is. We've been pretty successful doing that, as long as there's a pathway laid out. So here's the pathway, and if you want to do this pathway and get into corporate or go into a profession, you follow these steps and you do what people say and you pass the test. Well, you will get there, and then you can say, well, what's there? Was it really everything I thought it was going to be? Is the corporate life or the professional practice life or whatever it is? Does that give you the real freedom you want? And so often it doesn't.
No, you are right. And I've I hang out with so many entrepreneurs. Sometimes I lose sight of that. And lately I've run into a number of good employee people, like W-2 people like I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then you listen to their stories and how they're, approaching retirement and living paycheck to paycheck and don't know what they're going to do because of the impacts of inflation. And man, it really is a lot different journey once you're out of that pathway. But they never taught me that stuff in engineering school. They didn't even teach me about, interest. They didn't teach me about your network or the average of your five, like Jim Rohn says. None of that was taught. All I was taught was how to be a great employee.
Well, that's what I was saying. They wanted you to be the best worker for them. And if they were to give you the keys to getting out, well, that wouldn't serve them very well. It's too bad, but that's the way that's the way school education system is today. It's set up to create workers in, quote, a system. And again, there's nothing wrong with those who choose to be in that realm and want to do that. That's okay. But realize it's a choice. You get to make a choice today. And I think the choice for a lot of people, a choice of freedom, but that also means you've got to leave the safety net, if you will, the guardrails that, some job, career, or profession is going to give you. And you've got to have a sense of adventure, right? A little bit of adventure inside you, and realizing that part of having the freedom means also responsibility of evolving, continue to educate yourself, continue to, climb a different ladder, if you will, evolve in a different way. And those experiences that we have had the benefit of having with so many great people over the years is what has taught us how to, maneuver or pivot in these fast changing times. And I'd say today, Jim, are we not going through some pretty major iterations?
I would say so.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
I think so. I think the days of going back to getting seller financing and some of those really good things are coming back into vogue. Though I've had really good luck getting seller financing for a couple of years now. But I think there'll be more and more of that coming.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the shift that's going on right now. We've been, I'd say the world, certainly the US and, a lot of markets, industries, businesses, real estate for sure, has been the benefactor of pretty cheap money, low interest rates for a lot of years now. Cheap interest rates, and really, we've had disinflation actually for 40 years. Go back to the 1980s when we had the last round of high inflation this country's experienced. And from that point, as Volcker came in and ramped the Fed's fund rate way up to 20%, and through a couple of recessions back in the early 80s, basically tamped down inflation. And we really haven't seen inflation until, well, this now. And I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. We were entering a period back in the back then when, well, our generation, the boomers were entering and had entered the workforce. So labor was available everywhere. So that kept, prices down. And we have had, years and decades of strong globalization, the world working together and really becoming very efficient and just-in-time inventory and outsourcing labor to other countries. And that's kept the prices down. And now look what's happened now with COVID, and now we have Russia, Ukraine, and China, and we've got all these issues. So now that's breaking up, right? And so you throw all that into the mix. Now, for the first time in 40 years, the Fed has to deal with inflation. Whereas in the past, Jim, every time the economy, the stock market would flutter a little bit because and they'd think, oh my gosh, we have to save. The Fed would say we have to save the day. And of course they did. They'd come and they would lower interest rates again, and they'd do quantitative easing, which just expands credit, and well, the markets go back up. Real estate also. We've had a lot of that, but now we've got these headwinds that the Fed is really got a mandate to fight, which means they're going to have to turn the screws, I think, harder on the short-term rates, which is what they control. They don't control the mortgage rates. That's a different ballgame, and we can talk about that. But these changes in the market, you said it's going to change the dynamics, certainly, of financing, which, if you know what you're doing, that can be a good thing. But what about in general? I'm going to read you something I picked up today, just some online stuff. Says that the housing bubble 2.0, according to data from the NAHB yesterday, 19% of home builders in July said they cut prices to prop up sales and limit cancellations. This was up 13% in June. Yet, using data from John Burns Real Estate Consulting, home builders, despite their best efforts to limit cancellations by engaging in price cuts, still saw cancellation spike to over 17% in July, which was worse than the COVID high of 16.5%, which is back in April 2020. This begs the question, is the housing bubble already popping? Now, we both know that housing real estate is very geographical. I happen to know that East Coast is still pretty darn strong. I know where you are in Richmond. I look at the stats. You guys are still strong there. So I don't think you're feeling much of that effect.
I'm investing a lot in Florida as well, and it's very strong there as well.
Very strong there. Just so people know, you have a online real estate networking group of, I don't know how many millions. It seems like it's millions. It's like hundreds of thousands. I mean, so my point is, even though you are, like most of us, local to a certain market, maybe that's where you've put most of your emphasis, and now you've also branched to Florida, but you also have a pulse on what's going on, wide. So if there's a way to say from a broad base nationally, do you think that we're going to see some more changes? Again, local for sure is going to be different than national, but what are you sensing?
I think sales are slowing down a little bit, but I don't see prices reducing, and our rents are still going up. So as a landlord, I'm not really participating that much in inflation from the negative side. I'm keeping pace, so I'm doing pretty well as a landlord, but I think sales are slowing. But I can give you an example in Richmond from this weekend, because you met my son-in-law, Luke, but he had a listing at 575 and had over 100 showings and multiple offers and sold it for 640. So that's a high price point, and it still went multiple and still sold. The last one that I sold, I don't do many flips anymore, but I did do one. I listed it at 300 and I sold it for 320 with multiple offers. So, we may, and again, a year and a half ago, maybe it would have gone up even more, who knows? But I think if people aren't crazy when they list and they're in a good location, it'll still sell, at least in Virginia, and I think Florida as well.
Where do you see just affordability in the
yeah, that's a big thing.
Because at some point, high prices or relatively higher prices, some markets have, done over 40% increase in the last 2 years. I mean, that's
no, there's some markets that have gone up 40% in 12 months.
Which markets are those? There's
some markets in Florida.
See, it's like, say,
along the Gulf Coast.
Well, and I think
Tampa and some of the Fort Myers area and different sections over there.
And I think some of the, I would say some of the problem in that regard, Jim, and tell me what you know about Florida, but a lot of investor money has come into certain markets. I think Florida is one of those for sure, and because they can have cheaper money than we can get as homeowners can get, and so they can push prices up higher, and they have in certain markets, have had a heavy influence. So what happened? So that pushes the.
So I think more people are going to be renting.
Well, but okay, right, but and as you said, rents have been going up strongly the last couple of years, but at some point, people aren't going to be able to even afford the rents, or rents continue to escalate. I mean, there's whether they can afford to buy the house or rent is going to be capped, because eventually people in certain markets are going to top out on the affordability aspect.
Sure, but I mean, I'm seeing rental applications where people making, dual incomes over $100,000 a year with credit scores of 700. Now, normally those folks would be buying,
yeah,
but there hasn't been much inventory the last couple of years either. So
they're
all of a sudden they're renting, and they can afford $1,600 a month.
They're forced to rent
in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I'm happy to rent to them.
So again, being clear to people that real estate is very geographically specific.
Yes.
I'll just say in certain markets where it's been tech industry. I'll just mention in our state of Texas, Austin, Texas. Now we're seeing some huge blowback right now in Austin. If we go into a recession, which means at some point, again, certain job sectors, certain employment categories could see layoffs, and if a certain market area, I'll just say Austin, where it's pretty tech heavy these days in the last decade or so, which is what's been one reason why prices have gone up so much, because tech drives a lot, and when tech's going strong. But did you know Amazon laid off 100,000 workers? Yeah, Amazon, Jim, Amazon, 100,000 workers. So when you start seeing some major corporations start to lay off, where does it start to go? And again, I'm just taking the other side. And saying at what point do we as investors potentially, and again, know your market, but where do we need to be careful? Do you still feel like, not for you specifically, because I know you've been through multiple markets many years, and that's why I like to talk to you, but do you see an overall maybe a little bit more irrational exuberance from some people that just seem like they don't have a sense that there could be a change, and they still maybe are maybe a little bit on the speculative side? Do you feel like there's any of that out there?
Yeah, I would imagine. And I think there's going to be certain things that go first. Like I was thinking about it the other day, and say multifamily, which I was really looking heavily at until all this really started happening, and I kind of pulled back my buy box on that. But just think about all the people that are taking these bridge loans. Bridge loans are basically commercial hard money loans. That's basically
so people understand what we're talking about. So why does somebody need to take a bridge loan? I mean, just explain the process.
Let's just say that I've never taken one, but let's say you take a bridge loan. It's sort of like a commercial hard money loan for like 2 years. It gives you time to, stabilize, raise rents, improve the property.
It's a short-term loan to get in to the property, a property that you're going to make improvements to, and get it stabilized, raise rents, get more higher occupancy, and then after that 2-year bridge loan period, what happens after that?
You refi it, but what happens during that 2 years if rates, I don't know, go from 5 to 7 or whatever? All of a sudden they may not be able to refi. And then what happens to that bridge loan? Those are the opportunities I'm going to be watching.
Yeah, you're the snake in the grass, Jim. I've seen your type before. Yeah. Well, but you're exactly right. So I think that's a good point. That while credit's still open, people will buy on the premise that they're going to be able to do this value add, and that they can still refinance that bridge loan, that short-term loan, for their long-term at still a low enough interest rate where it makes sense. But if rates pop a couple points and say in 2 years, what's that do to their cash flow margins?
With rents increasing like they are, it may overcome the rate. So I could be wrong. So I could take either side of this.
But see, I think you're right. It could. And they may, but I think to me, that's the speculative side. To me, that's the speculative side. I'd rather be like you and say, okay, I'll let some other people be the front runners on that, see how it goes. Yep. Could I miss out on some of that if I wasn't playing the game? Sure. Just like I hate to say it, Jim, I missed out on big crypto swing that went up to almost 70 and back down again. I missed that completely.
I'm thankful I did.
So should I feel bad? I guess, I'm not picking on it, but I'm just saying that's a little bit of a speculative mode, right? And so if you put too much into speculation, maybe you put a little bit in speculation, right? And you say, okay, well, I can cover that. If that doesn't work out, I'm okay. That's kind of like crypto. If it doesn't work out, I'm okay. But if you overload and that's your model too heavily, then you become a potential net seller, in a year, 2 years when things, may be different than they are today. That's
when I want them to call me.
Yes, I know. I've seen your signs. I've seen, those bus stop signs. I saw, call Jim. I'll buy it anytime, any day.
There you go.
That's,
there you go.
Yeah, that's you out there on the forefront. All right. Well, this is good. I think I'm going to go back one last little thing that we talked about earlier on. And, you talked about people that are just getting started, right? People just, and that happens a lot when the markets have been running for a while. Well, we again, you see it in the stock market, you see it with Robinhood and all these young investors who have never seen a recession or a major correction, unless, even if they were alive during 2000 or 2008, they probably weren't adults, so they didn't really know what was going on. And so a lot of people know is just up, and cheap interest rates, and the Fed comes to save the day. And if you do have a correction, just hang on or buy the dip, and then things go on. I don't think we're going to continue to see that. Personally, I think there's not going to be a lot more buy the dip. I think the dip's going to be the dip, and then if you bought the dip, you're the dip. Does that make sense? Yeah. So for young people getting started right now, and probably for sure don't have number one, the experience, the resources, the network that someone like you has. You're patient. You've got what we call a buy box criteria that you will shift with the times. A new person doesn't have one yet. So how should they go forward? Not telling them they shouldn't get involved, but how would you tell a young person? It could be one of my young dentists that are out there. There's a lot of them the same way. It's like they're seeing what's happening. They go, wow, everybody's making all this money in real estate. I need to get in there now. So what would you tell them as the best way to?
Well, I'll share with you, like I've got a buy box as well, but my buy box went from like here to here. I've shrunk it. Like I don't need to keep buying. So why would I be aggressively buying right now? I don't think that makes sense. Cheryl and I have talked about it, and she's like, don't buy any more houses. But
Cheryl told you not money more. Where is she? Get her in there. I want to talk.
I'm working with my daughter Carissa a lot, who's 30, and she's got several rentals already over the last year, and she quit her job at the hospital, by the way.
Oh, did she?
And just does this full time. She loves being an Airbnb host and other stuff. She's got a longer timeline than I do. So it depends. If you're younger, you got a little more time, and that really time takes care of a lot of things in real estate. So it just sort of depends on how you're getting started. I've reduced my buy box, so I don't need to. I'm trying not to look at multifamily. I'm trying not to look at as much stuff anyways. But if you're young and you have 30 years, that's a long time. Imagine if you could start over. David, let me ask you, if you had to start over, if you were 20 again, what would you do in this market? What would you tell yourself?
I would, knowing what I know today, is I would find people that I could trust. Just like we had to find the Jack Millers, I would find those people and do whatever I had to do, whether it was to work for them or whatever, to gain some insights and have them look over my shoulders. I would do whatever it took to do that, because that's going to save me time, money, mistakes, and still let me get started with somebody who's making sure. And that's why I tell any young person, don't do this by yourself. Find the people, and you gotta ferret through them, right? I mean, you just don't take the first person who offers you advice or something, or here, I'll make you a loan. I mean, sure, people make you loans, but I mean, are they really going to help you? You got to find those people.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. If I had had that, I mean, you and I started before there was YouTube, Facebook, or anything. None of that stuff existed when we started.
I know.
It's a lot easier now. But you always have to be cautious and do your due diligence. And that's what I'm doing with my kids now. is helping them move forward without making the mistakes that I made.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's a lot faster.
Yeah.
But I think if you're young and you're getting started and you have a long time ahead of you, you know, and if you're careful, I think it all comes down to like your buy box is really important right now. Don't buy without having equity day one, in my opinion. And I know like a lot of private practice people will just put the 20% down and walk into it with no equity, hoping that it goes up. I don't think that's a good viable model right now. A lot of people buy Airbnbs that way too, David. We haven't really talked much about that, but I see a lot of people in like Gatlinburg paying $1 million for a cabin and putting 200,000 down. And then all of a sudden their bookings are loosening up right now and they're not getting, you know, $500 a night. Yeah. I love Airbnb, but I think it's important to be able to pivot into other models with the same property.
Yeah, I think the point is you've got to buy something that you conceive of putting into an Airbnb concept. Is you got to buy that so that if you had to turn it back into a long-term rental, you know, right. And as you said, people are buying them on the basis of the multiples that a successful Airbnb model would produce on an income basis on average rentals per night at that higher price point. But yeah, we hit the skids recession. I mean, you know, we've had a lot of things, and that's and there's regulation in some markets, as we both know. Regulators coming in, they're really cutting back on the opportunity to do Airbnb. So all these things can change, and
you have to pivot.
You got to be able to pivot. So you know, knowing what that buy box is for each different model that you're looking at, and just realizing that fundamentals in anything are the key. And if you start to stray from fundamentals, that's where people get hurt. So
that's the only one I want to pick on, really. And I think from cash flow, I really love, you know, duplexes, quads, and small apartment buildings are pretty easy. It's getting hard to cash flow on single family homes in a lot of markets. They've gone up. So
yeah, the price points go up and the rents do go up, but not
enough. Not enough, because if median's 300 in a market, you know, you might have to be a third of that. And think of it, 1/3 of your median at 100 in order to cash flow, or 150 maybe on a single family home. So I think I'd be a little bit careful of single family homes, even though I've always loved them. I think the price points are difficult. And I'd be a little cautious of the Airbnb, like high-end destination points, like say Gatlinburg. I'm not picking on Gatlinburg. I don't know. I just know there's people that have been buying cabins in Gatlinburg for $1 million, putting 200,000 down.
I was going to send this clip to the mayor of Gatlinburg just to let him know who you are. In case they want to offer, you know, a free trip.
If anyone's got $1 million cabin you want to sell for 500, then contact me.
There you go. Well, Jim, it's always great to talk to you. We'll have to do this on some kind of repeated basis, because I know the market's going to continue to probably change, and we'll see what it does. But the thing I know about you is that no matter what happens, you're always steps ahead and watching, and that's, you know, well, no, seriously, and few people have that advantage in the years of experience to do that. So watching ahead, and I think that's valuable to other people who are maybe this is their first kind of rodeo in a market change cycle. And I think the wisdom that you portray has a lot of benefit if people will just listen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. If you enjoyed watching or learning from this video, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more content. If you have a question about any of my content or this specific video, just please leave a comment down below. And as always, stay focused on your freedom. I'll see you next time.